Demonstrate now how to properly crimp a wire to one of these connection pins. This is a Deutsch DTM connector, and it is comprised of a housing, a wedge lock, and it comes with the contact pins. And this is sold as a kit here. Each of these individual components can also be purchased individually, but the kit's nice, and I purchased this through Motec USA. It comes with, you know, all the parts that you need, and just makes ordering a little easier. They also give you an extra pin, which is nice in case you lose one or if you crimp one incorrectly. So that's what I'm going to demonstrate. I'm just going to also show real briefly another connector I like, which is Amphenol mil-spec connector. This is real nice. It has a real secure connection. Two halves go together and it just locks into place. It's got a real nice strain relief. Both these connector designs use or accommodate solid barrel pin connectors, which I'll show you here being demonstrated in a moment. But the nice thing there is you can use the same crimp tool. So anyway, that's your mil-spec connector, which I purchased from DigiKey. So anyway, I'm just going to kind of let the contents of the bag out here so you can see all the individual components. And there's your wedge lock, there's your housing, and then our pin. So here we go. Here's a little strip of wire. It's Teflon coated. So also mil-spec wire, real tough stuff against the elements, heat, oil, any kind of moisture. Better than your average wire. Costs a little extra for sure, but definitely worth the money if reliability is important to you. So I'm going to splice the end, and I'm just kind of doing this from experience here. And you want it so it bottoms out in the connector and leaves just a little bit of the wire showing ideally. Now if you're doing a bunch of these, you know, leave the tip on so the ends don't fray. It just makes going into the connector a little bit more difficult if they do. So I'm just doing one wire, so I'm going to pull the tip off now. But if I was doing you know, 16, 20 wires, for example, mass production style, then I would just leave the tips on. So here we go, pull off the end, really easy. And let's just check and see how we did. There we go, that's perfect. And I don't know if it shows, you know, in the, let's see if we can focus in there, but I'm not too sure if it shows, but just a little bit of the wire is showing past the end of the barrel when the connector is bottomed out onto the wire. So that's what you'll want. And then let's ready our crimp tool. So this is our crimp tool right here. This is a 20 gauge connector pin. Now that accommodates a variety of different gauge wires. 20, 22, 24, 26 I think is the limit on that. This is a 24 gauge wire, so I'm using a 20 gauge pin connector. And so in that particular case we already have the setting where we want it, you know, on this turret. But you know, you can get that's not wanting to, there we go, that's why. Okay, so anyway, this snaps out, and then you can go for 12 gauge pin, 16 gauge pin, 20 gauge pin. So you set it how you want it, lock it into place. I mean, as you can tell, I probably don't do this a whole lot, and that's because I always use this gauge pin. But on the other hand, this is the setting that's particularly interesting, where you want to set for the exact gauge wire that you're using. And they have a label on the side here that, you know, shows you for each contact size or pin size, terminology I've been using. You want the red positioner, and then I'm using 22 gauge wire, so I want selector 3. So you just kind of come over here and you align to selector setting 3. There you go. And what that'll do is that'll just determine how hard the crimp tool, or how far in the crimp tool squeezes in on the contact. And so it'll give you a perfect crimp every time. So that's that. And then You know, just make sure our wire's in context position well, and we just kind of go in through the end there. And you just bottom it out in there. You know, just give a little extra force to make sure the wire's, you know, bottomed out, you know, into the connector. You want it the wire going into the connector as far as it can, and then, you know, push the whole thing into the crimp tool as far as it can, which I'm doing here. Give it a crimp, and there we go. Perfect crimp. And we want to give it a pull test. Now, if I want to be really uptight, you know, about making sure everything's right, I'll use a, you know, crimp pull tester, you know, which grabs both ends and pulls them at a designated amount of force. But I'm not going to do that because I know from experience that this is right. I can tell just by looking at it. But I do give a sanity pull test, which is what I'm doing there. And so then our crimp is complete. And at this point, putting it into the connector is also super easy. Just goes in here. You just kind of push through, and the wire has enough rigidity that I can just kind of continue to push through. And I don't know if you heard it, but it snaps into place. You can see it there at the end. And I cannot pull it back out at this point because there's little tangs in there. Now, if I ever wanted to release it, I can just kind of use a little screwdriver. There's actually a tool for this, but I have never bothered to purchase it. You just kind of pull that tang back, you know, while you're pulling on the wire. Just a little finesse required, and it comes right out. Anyway, basically, you know, wash, rinse, repeat, you know, for each of the connector pins that you want to insert into your connector housing. I'm just doing one because I'm just doing a demo here. And there's this wedge lock, and it can go in really one of two ways, but either way is perfectly correct. So just pop around in there and push, and we have a completed assembly. And then if I ever want to take that out again, I can just take a pair of needle nose pliers, pull that right out, and I can completely disassemble this thing, and I can reuse this connector really as many times as I want. I just have to purchase new pins each time. So the connector, a little bit expensive, I suppose, depending on what's expensive for you, but the pins, cheap, relatively. So that's that. And then to label, I like to use this Brady BMP 21 label maker, which is really nice. I would just go ahead and turn this thing on. It takes batteries, or I happen to have a power supply because I just get tired of going through batteries. Not that it's, you know, bad on batteries, but with the power supply I never need to buy batteries. And then I'm just going to say type in what I want here, which in this case would be test. It's nice though because it has symbols and it does uppercase and lowercase, and you can accommodate different gauge wires. This isn't a demo on the label maker though, so I'm just going to stop there and print this thing out. Out comes the label. Just there's this little action right here to cut the label. And then I'm just gonna, it's nice because they give you a little strip there that doesn't have label over it, so it's really easy to peel the label off. You don't have to fuss around. This is probably, you know, this is for a higher gauge wire than I actually used, and that's okay. It just means I end up using, there's more wraps than I really need to be able to see the label from all the way around. And just kind of start. Now, I'm not really making this look easy, but it actually is easy. So, but start there, and just kind of, all right, this is not working out quite like I hoped it would, but you get the idea. You just kind of wrap around, and then you have your label, and you can see that, you know, no matter how the connector's rotated, you can see the label, you know, the words on the label really easily. So, which is nice if you're underneath the car and you're going through a bunch of wires and, you know, having to sit there and fiddle around trying to, where is that thing? And then if you really want to do a complete job, you know, put a little shrink wrap on there. So then we have, with the exception of the sloppy label job there, we have a perfectly good wire connection end. So anyway, that's the demo. Hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed. Bye.